For 5 years, a shadowy horse stood frozen by an ancient gate. Yearning for its master vanished in the flames of war. Then on a wild, stormy night, a chilling cry pierced the dark as it bolted into the woods, chasing a truth too shocking to imagine. What lies beyond? Before continuing the story, tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far this video has come. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so I can send you exciting stories like this every day. Thank you. The wind drifted softly across the golden plains of Montana, carrying the faint echoes of a small town's quiet endurance. On the outskirts of Willow Creek stood an old wrought iron gate, its paint weathered and peeling from years under the relentless sun and snow. It marked the boundary of Harper Ranch, home to a creature as enduring as the land itself, a majestic black stallion named Thunder. His sleek coat shimmered under the early light of dawn, and his deep, penetrating eyes stayed fixed on the horizon, as if yearning for something or someone. Thunder had once been the prized companion of Captain Ethan Harper, a hero in the hearts of the townsfolk who had ridden him off to war 5 years ago. When Ethan departed, he left Thunder in the care of Clara Bennett, a young woman who had grown up working on the ranch. Over time, she and Thunder had forged an unspoken understanding. Though Clara knew their bond could never rival the deep connection the stallion shared with his master, each evening, Thunder would prowl the edge of the meadow before stopping at the gate, standing utterly still, ears alert, as though he were waiting for the sound of galloping hooves returning him home. The townspeople had grown accustomed to the sight. Some found it heartbreakingly loyal, a symbol of devotion that transcended time. Others, their words laced with cynicism over beers at the local bar, deemed it a fruitless hope. After all, no one came back from war unchanged if they came back at all. But Clara held fast to her belief. She would sit by the gate with Thunder as the sun melted into the hills, her voice steady as she read aloud from the letters Ethan had sent from the front. But now months had passed since the last letter arrived, and the quiet absence gnawed at her resolve, though she never let it show. One evening, under the heavy weight of an approaching rainstorm, Clara stood in the stable, running a soft brush along Thunder's mane. The stallion remained calm under her gentle touch, though his ears twitched sharply toward the meadow, always on alert. "Still waiting, aren't you?" Clara murmured, her voice low and tinged with sadness. "Me too." The words hovered in the air, a fragile thread of connection between the two of them. Later that night, as Clara prepared to lock the stable doors, a piercing whinny shattered the stillness, sending shivers down her spine. She rushed out to find Thunder at the gate, his powerful hooves clawing at the ground in a frenzy. His head flung high, nostrils flared, he neighed into the darkness with a desperation that made Clara's heart race. "Thunder, what is it?" she called, her voice trembling. The horse turned toward her, his eyes wide with urgency, before snapping his gaze back to the horizon. He pawed at the ground, his muscled frame trembling with energy, as if the very air had shifted, thick with something Clara couldn't name. The faint tolling of the town's church bell echoed in the distance, a somber reminder of the storm's imminent arrival. Wrapping her shawl tightly around her shoulders, Clara scanned the darkening sky. Yet it wasn't the weather that unnerved her. It was the palpable, undeniable sense that something had irrevocably changed. Just as she reached out to steady Thunder, a jagged streak of lightning split the sky, momentarily illuminating the land beyond the gate. For the briefest of moments, Clara thought she saw a movement, a shadow too deliberate to be the wind. She blinked and it was gone. "What are you trying to tell me?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the growing storm. Thunder let out another urgent cry, his hooves pounding the earth with renewed force. The rain began to fall in earnest, soaking Clara as she stood rooted in place, her unease growing with each passing second. Whatever Thunder sensed, it wasn't over. Not yet. The rain battered the roof of the stable relentlessly throughout the night, its rhythm a haunting backdrop to Clara's restless thoughts. She sat with her back against the stable wall, watching Thunder pace with a nervous energy she'd never seen before. His gaze stayed fixed on the stable doors, as if anticipating them to burst open at any moment. Not even the fiercest tempests had ever unsettled him this way. By the time dawn broke, the storm had eased, leaving the ranch shrouded in a ghostly mist. Hoping to ease his agitation, Clara led Thunder into the meadow for a walk. Yet his ears stayed perked, his dark eyes constantly darting toward the horizon. Unlike him, the other horses in the nearby paddocks were calm, grazing contentedly, oblivious to the tension that gripped Thunder. "Clara!" a voice called, breaking her thoughts. Turning, she saw Jacob, the blacksmith's apprentice, striding toward her. His cheeks were flushed from the morning chill, and a look of concern clouded his usually easygoing demeanor. There was talk at the tavern last night. News from the front. Some soldiers were returning. Clara's heart surged with hope. "Did they mention Captain Harper?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jacob's face turned cautious as he shook his head. "No word about him specifically, but they're saying the survivors are in rough shape." The words hit Clara like a weight in her chest. For 5 long years, she had clung to hope, buoyed by Ethan's letters filled with promises of a future together. Yet as the months of silence dragged on, doubts began to creep into her thoughts. She never dared to voice them, least of all around Thunder. Somehow she felt the horse could sense her fears as keenly as she could sense his moods. Here's a rewritten version of the passage with altered wording, but the same core content preserved in American English, US. That afternoon, as Clara swept through the stable, her hand grazed something buried in the straw. Frowning, she tugged it loose and caught her breath. A dulled brass metal glinted weakly in the sunlight, and she immediately spotted Ethan's name etched into its surface. He'd once shown it to her, a memento of valor from an earlier mission. "How'd this get here?" she muttered, lifting it as her voice quivered. Thunder stirred in his stall, his deep eyes following her every move. "Did you dig this up?" Clara asked, chuckling faintly at the oddity of questioning a horse. Yet something in Thunder's stare, sharp, almost perceptive, sent a chill racing down her spine. She tucked the metal into her pocket, a restless unease tingling across her skin. If Thunder had unearthed it, where had it been hiding all this time? And why turn up now? The days that followed were tense and unsettled. Thunder's actions grew odder by the hour. He scraped at the dirt near the gate, raced in tight loops across the pasture, and refused his regular feed. Clara tried every trick to soothe him, but nothing took. Whispers rippled through the village. "That horse is losing it," Mrs. Evelyn grumbled on her morning stroll. Some were harsher, muttering that Thunder's restlessness spelled trouble, a dark hint that Ethan was gone for good. A few even urged Clara to sell him, calling him a weight she didn't need, but the idea twisted her stomach. Thunder wasn't just some animal. He was a breathing link to Ethan, a tether to their shared past. Letting him go would mean giving in, and Clara wasn't ready to wave that white flag. One evening, with the sky ablaze in the sunset's red glow, she lingered by the gate, Ethan's metal gripped in her palm. Its edges felt polished smooth from her absent tracing. "You feel his absence too, huh?" she murmured, her words soft against the twilight wind. Thunder dipped his head, his warm breath grazing her arm, and for a fleeting second, Clara could have sworn he got it. Morning brought a surprise. A band of worn-out soldiers shuffled into town, their uniforms shredded, faces gaunt with fatigue. Clara's pulse pounded as she darted toward them. She picked out Sergeant Daniel in the crowd, one of Ethan's tightest allies. "Sergeant!" she shouted, grabbing his arm with shaky hands. "Any word on Ethan? Captain Harper?" Daniel's face clouded, and he paused. "When I last saw him," his voice broke. "It was a mess, Miss Whitaker. Ambushed, pinned down by gunfire. The captain held back to shield our escape." Clara's legs buckled, the ground tilting beneath her. "Held back?" she repeated. "What's that mean? Is he—" Her voice cracked, and Daniel exhaled, his tone thick with sorrow. "I can't say. All I know is he fought like a demon to save us. If anyone could make it, it's him." Clara stumbled back to the stable, her mind spinning. Thunder met her with a shrill, urgent neigh, his unease sharper than ever. She couldn't shake the nagging sense that the horse knew more, felt something she couldn't grasp. Was his tension tied to Ethan? As if on cue, Thunder unleashed a mighty cry and charged for the gate. His hooves tore into the soil with a drive Clara had never witnessed. "Thunder!" she yelled, racing after him, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. She gripped the metal hard as she ran, the cold dawn air searing her lungs and fogging her breath. Mist draped the fields. swallowing her calls. "Thunder, hold up!" she shouted again, but the stallion's determination didn't waver. His black coat shimmered in the dim light as he charged ahead, each stride carrying him closer to an unknown destination. Clara followed, fear and hope warring in her chest. Whatever lay beyond the gate, Thunder was determined to lead her there. He rode with a determined stride, his pace unyielding as though propelled by an unseen force. Clara felt her heart hammering in her chest, an inexplicable compulsion driving her forward, urging her to follow. She had no idea why, but something deep within her believed she was being guided toward a revelation. The open meadow soon surrendered to a dense forest, its skeletal branches clawing skyward through a thick veil of mist. The ground grew treacherous beneath her feet, tangled with roots and jagged stones, each step an effort against the soft, rain-soaked earth. It had been years since she'd ventured this far from the village, ever since her father's death had transformed the woods from a place of solace into one of emptiness and alienation. Thunder, her horse, came to a halt, his nostrils flaring as he surveyed the dim thicket. His ears twitched in agitation, and he snorted, stamping the ground as though aggrieved by some unseen presence. "What is it, boy?" Clara called out, breathless as she caught up to him. Thunder's head jerked toward a dark tangle of brush, his stare fixed with unrelenting intensity. Clara paused, then edged forward, pulled by the focus of his gaze. She knelt beside an old oak, its gnarled roots weaving a twisted maze, and there it was, a battered leather satchel, nearly swallowed by the forest floor. The straps hung frayed, the leather worn and pitted from years of neglect. Her breath snagged as she pried it loose, her shaky hands fumbling to open it. Nestled inside lay a journal, its pages bloated and buckled from time and moisture. Faint initials, TW, were carved into the cover, dim but distinct. Tears pricked her eyes as she leafed through it. The script inside was painfully recognizable. Ethan's, her brother's, words spilled across the pages, dotted with drawings and scattered thoughts, snapshots of life before the war claimed him. One entry stole her breath. "Thunder's more than my horse. He's my companion, my rock amid the storm. I rely on him more than I do myself. If I don't come back, I hope someone looks after him. He shouldn't waste his days waiting." Clara gripped the journal closer, her chest tight with a flood of feelings. As she read on, the writing grew jagged, the lines unsteady, a quiet panic seeping through. A late entry sent a shiver down her spine. "The battles are worse than I ever dreamed. If I make it through, it'll be thanks to Thunder. He took a hit for me once, blocking the shrapnel. If I don't return, I hope he finds his way home. He always knows how." Thunder huffed sharply, his hoof scraping the earth as if to pull her back to the moment. Clara rose, clutching the journal to her heart, her gaze locking with his. A strange peace settled over her then, as though the tangle of fear and doubt unraveled into a gentle clarity. "You knew all along, didn't you?" she murmured, sensing his quiet intelligence, his intent. Somehow he'd led her here, not just to find Ethan's words, but to touch his spirit again. Thunder let out a piercing cry, his frame tensing abruptly. With no pause, he started deeper into the woods, his stride confident, his mission clear. Journal in hand, Clara trailed him, her boots sinking into the mire as she lurched ahead. She steadied herself against rough tree trunks, her scratched palms smarting, but her determination held firm. The fog thickened, the cold biting through her jacket. Yet Thunder forged on, his course steady and sure. The landscape began to feel familiar, faint echoes of memory clawing their way up. They reached a slim ravine, tugging at hazy images of a hunting trip with her father long ago. She'd walked this ground before, though the details blurred. A worn stone marker stood out, a rugged signpost in the dense timber. As her mind cleared through the haze, she saw it. Thunder's path traced that distant trek. He halted suddenly at the ravine's base, his fierce eyes pinned to a stand of ancient trees. Clara's heartbeat surged as she drew near, a coil of expectation tightening inside her. Beneath the knotted roots of a massive oak, something lay tucked away, a form half buried in leaves and soil. She dropped to her knees, her breath catching as she swept the dirt aside, her pulse hammering with the gravity of the find. It was a man, his uniform shredded, his face caked with filth, shaking without control. Clara's fingers peeled back the grime, revealing Ethan's features underneath. His skin was ashen, his eyes closed, but she knew him instantly. "Ethan!" she gasped, her voice splintering with dread and joy. At her cry, his eyelids fluttered, meeting her gaze for a wrenching second before his energy faded. "Thunder got me here," he breathed, his words a fragile whisper. Clara swallowed a sob, drawing him close in her arms. Thunder, her loyal steed, stood watch, his breath fogging the air around them like a warm barrier against the relentless, icy rain. It felt as if he'd been sent to lead her past the safe bounds of their town, into this wild gloom, straight to where Ethan waited. Thunder whinnied gently, his ears twitching as if to say, "I've always known the path." Clara's heart roared as she held Ethan tight, her trembling hands wiping the mud and rain from his face. All around them, the clearing was shrouded in an oppressive darkness. The wind shrieked through the trees, and heavy sheets of rain beat down on the earth, intensifying the dire urgency she felt. Ethan's skin was cold and pale, his breath shallow, but he was alive. Thunder's imposing frame loomed over them, shielding them from the relentless storm. The stallion's eyes glowed with an unearthly intensity as they met Clara's, as though urging her to act swiftly. "Stay with me, Ethan," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion as she fought to steady herself. "You're going to make it. I won't let you go." The clearing felt impossibly far from any semblance of safety, the forest a maze of twisted branches that blocked the scant light, the rain-soaked ground slick and treacherous beneath her feet. Her allies, exhausted soldiers left behind in the village, were miles away. She was alone save for Thunder. Summoning all her courage, Clara tore a strip from her skirt, wrapping it tightly around Ethan's wounds in a desperate attempt to staunch the bleeding. Fear clawed at her insides, but she forced herself to focus, clinging to the hope that these frantic actions might keep him alive. Ethan winced under her touch, his eyes fluttering open briefly before sliding shut again, her chest tightened with desperation. "You'll be all right," she murmured, more to herself than to him. Suddenly, Thunder neighed sharply, stamping his hooves with an urgency that cut through the chaos around them. Clara looked up at him, feeling his unspoken command as he turned his gaze toward the forest path. His stance was tense, deliberate, and his eyes were filled with a resolve that mirrored the one Ethan had often shown during his strongest moments. She understood. With a steadying breath, Clara nodded. "All right, boy, we'll do this together." Summoning every ounce of strength, she heaved Ethan's limp form, his weight a crushing burden against her smaller frame. Thunder held steady, his head low, allowing her to drape Ethan across his broad back. The stallion remained unflinching, acutely aware of the precious life he carried. Gripping the reins tightly, Clara began leading them back through the forest. The rain persisted, turning the already treacherous path into a mud-slick trial. Clara stumbled repeatedly, her knees scraping against the cold, wet ground. But each time she rose, more determined than before. Thunder moved with cautious precision, his steps deliberate to keep Ethan balanced. Each agonizing step forward felt like a victory, a fragile thread of hope keeping Clara going. As the first light of dawn broke through the storm, the village came into view, its warm lights flickering like a beacon of salvation. "Help! Please! Someone help!" Clara cried, her voice raw and desperate. The sound carried over the still-waking settlement, and figures began to emerge from the shadows. Jacob and Sergeant Daniel were the first to reach her. The sergeant's face twisted in shock as his eyes fell upon Ethan, barely conscious and draped across Thunder's back. "It can't be," he whispered, disbelief flashing in his expression before resolve hardened his features. "We need to get him inside now." Working quickly, they lifted Ethan from Thunder's back and carried him into the warmth of the village tavern. The room filled with villagers, their faces a mixture of astonishment and worry as they gathered around to see the captain they had long thought lost. Blankets and warm water arrived almost immediately, followed by the healer. Clara lingered by the doorway, drenched and shivering, her eyes glued to the scene as they worked desperately to stabilize Ethan. Outside, Thunder stood in the rain, his head bowed low, but his gaze fixed unwaveringly on the door. Clara, unable to stay still, stepped back into the downpour, her hand gently resting on the stallion's neck. "You saved him," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "You truly saved him." Thunder responded with a soft whinny, pressing into her touch as if to say, "It was what I was meant to do." As the days passed, Ethan's condition steadily improved. The healer called it nothing short of a miracle, recounting how they had tirelessly cleaned his wounds, applied medicinal herbs to stave off infection, and kept his body warm against the biting cold. But Clara knew deep in her heart that it was Thunder's relentless determination that had brought Ethan back from the brink. When Ethan was finally strong enough to sit up and speak, he asked for Clara. She entered the room hesitantly, her chest tight with emotion at the sight of him upright, his eyes gleaming with recognition. "You found me," he rasped, his voice faint but steady. "No," Clara replied, her smile trembling through her tears. "Thunder found you. He never gave up." Ethan's expression softened and unshed tears shimmered in his eyes. "He's always been the brave one," he murmured, "even when I couldn't be." Word of Thunder's loyalty spread quickly through the small countryside town. Villagers who had once dismissed the stallion as nothing special now marveled at his courage and devotion. Children came in groups to the pasture to catch a glimpse of the horse who had braved the elements to save his master. Thunder's tale grew, his name becoming synonymous not only with his service as a war horse, but as a symbol of steadfast loyalty and unwavering love. One brisk morning, as frost still clung to the grass, Ethan, now leaning on a cane, made his way to the meadow where Thunder grazed. Clara watched quietly from the stable as he approached, his steps deliberate but sure. Thunder lifted his head at the sound of Ethan's approach, his ears twitching in recognition. "Hello, old friend," Ethan greeted warmly, his voice imbued with gratitude. He placed a hand on Thunder's neck, and the horse closed his eyes as if savoring the touch. For a moment there was no war, no pain, no grief, just a man and his horse together again. As the seasons changed and wildflowers blanketed the meadow, Clara often found herself recalling that fateful stormy night. It felt like a distant dream, yet its reality was undeniable every time she saw Ethan and Thunder together. Both were healing, the bond between them growing deeper with each passing day. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in hues of amber and gold, Clara stood by the fence, watching Ethan ride Thunder across the meadow. Their silhouettes blended with the fading sunlight, a perfect portrait of harmony. They waited for each other, Clara whispered to herself, her heart swelling with quiet joy. And they found their way back. As if sensing her thoughts, Thunder lifted his head, his mane catching the evening breeze. He let out a triumphant, resonant neigh that echoed across the hills, a declaration of victory, loyalty, and an unshakable love. And for Clara, it was proof enough to believe in miracles. Wow, what an incredible ride this story has been. It's so much more than just a tale of a horse and his master. It's a profound dive into loyalty, love, and the unbreakable bonds that hold us together. That black stallion's unwavering dedication, guiding his way through the storm to find his lost companion, hits me right in the heart and makes me think of those times we trust in something bigger than ourselves. And the young woman's courage. She shows us that love isn't passive, it's a choice we make every single day. What about you? Did a moment in this story remind you of your own life? Maybe a time you held on for someone or something dear? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. If you believe in the kind of loyalty and miracles this story celebrates, hit that subscribe button, like, and share to spread the inspiration. Thanks for being here with me. See you in the next video and keep believing in your own miracles.